my name is Brooke Mitchell, and I'm 29 years old. Sometimes life writes ironies so perfect they seem fictional. My traditional parents disowned me because I was born female, not the son they wanted. They made it clear I would never be enough. 10 years later, my company is worth millions, and suddenly I'm getting calls from family who once erased me. The same people who said women can't succeed now want a piece of what I've built without them. Funny how money changes everything. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Hit subscribe and like if you've ever had to prove someone wrong who underestimated you. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in Oak Ridge, a suburban neighborhood in Connecticut where perfectly manicured lawns matched the perfectly maintained appearances of families like mine. My parents, Harold and Eleanor Mitchell, were first-generation Americans who carried their traditional values with them like precious heirlooms. My father built a moderately successful construction company from nothing, something he reminded us of daily. It was his proof that the American dream worked if you had the right stuff. And in his mind, the right stuff was exclusively masculine. From my earliest memories, I understood the hierarchy in our household. My two older brothers, Richard and Nicholas, were the princes of our family kingdom. They were the heirs to my father's business, the carriers of the Mitchell name, and the focus of my parents' pride. Richard was 5 years older than me, athletic and charismatic like my father. Nicholas, 3 years my senior, was studious and serious, the brains who would handle the financial side of the family business someday. Then there was me, the disappointment from day one. My mother once let slip after too many glasses of wine at Thanksgiving that when the doctor announced I was a girl, my father didn't speak to her for 3 days. We already had names picked out for our third son, she explained, as if this somehow justified his reaction. I was 7 when I overheard this, hiding under the dining table while the adults talked freely, thinking the children were playing outside. Some things you never forget, no matter how young you are when you hear them. I tried everything to earn my father's approval. When I brought home straight A's, he would glance at my report card and say, "That's nice, Brooke," before turning to Nicholas to ask about his B in algebra with far more concern and attention. When I won the science fair in 5th grade, my mother patted my head and said, "That's lovely, dear, but don't get too caught up in all that. Boys don't like girls who are too smart." Meanwhile, Richard's participation ribbon for football was framed and displayed in the living room. The only person who truly saw me was my grandmother, Evelyn. She lived with us until I was 12, occupying the small guest room at the end of the hall. When no one was looking, she would slip me books about female scientists, artists, and entrepreneurs. "They tried to keep these women down too," she'd whisper, her eyes twinkling with conspiracy. "Look what they did anyway." Our home was beautiful but cold. A 4-bedroom colonial with dark wood and stern family portraits. The dining room, where we were required to gather every evening at precisely 6:30 p.m., felt more like a boardroom. My father sat at the head, my mother at the foot, brothers on one side, and me alone on the other. Conversation revolved around the business, sports, or my brother's achievements. I became skilled at being invisible, a ghost at my own dinner table. The Mitchell Construction Company was my father's pride and joy. Founded when he was just 25, he had built it from a one-man operation into a regional contender with 30 employees. The company logo was emblazoned on everything from his coffee mug to the matching jackets my brothers received on their 16th birthdays. I never got a jacket. When I asked why, my father laughed and said, "What would be the point? You'll just get married and change your name anyway." School became my sanctuary. There, at least, achievement was achievement regardless of gender. My teachers praised my writing, my analytical mind, my hunger to learn. Miss Thompson, my 8th grade English teacher, once told me, "Brooke, you have the kind of mind that could change the world." I held those words close on the darkest days, when the silence at home threatened to convince me I was truly nothing. By 14, I had figured out that I would need to carve my own path. The family business would never be mine, regardless of my capabilities. While Richard and Nicholas were taken to job sites on weekends and taught the intricacies of contracts and construction, I taught myself business principles from library books. I started small, a babysitting service that I systematized with scheduled bookings, emergency contacts, and standardized rates. By 16, I had 8 other teenagers working under my management, serving 20 families in our neighborhood. I made enough to start a modest savings account that I kept secret from my family. My mother was a complex figure in my life. In public, she played the devoted wife and mother, complimenting my father's decisions and deferring to his judgment. In private moments, I sometimes caught glimpses of regret in her eyes, especially when she thought no one was looking. Once, after I won a prestigious writing competition, she slipped a small gift box under my pillow, a beautiful fountain pen with an inscription, "Write your own story." When I thanked her the next day, she quickly hushed me and said, "Don't mention it to your father." That pen became my most treasured possession, a small acknowledgement that at least one parent saw potential in me. Despite these small moments of connection, my mother never stood against my father. When he criticized my ambitions or dismissed my achievements, she would look down at her plate or suddenly become very interested in adjusting the table settings. Her silence was its own kind of rejection. As high school progressed, the divide between my brothers and me grew more pronounced. Richard had joined the family business right after high school, skipping college altogether. Nicholas was accepted to our father's alma mater, where he would study business administration before joining the company. Their futures were mapped out, secured, and celebrated. Mine remained a question mark that no one in my family seemed interested in answering. By the time I reached my senior year of high school, the distance between my reality and my brothers had become a chasm. Richard, at 23, had already been promoted to site manager at Mitchell Construction. Nicholas was entering his junior year at State University, his entire tuition and expenses covered by our parents. Meanwhile, I was filling out scholarship applications every night until my hand cramped. The college discussion in our house was brief and brutal. Over Sunday dinner, I carefully brought up the acceptance letters I'd received, including one from Westfield University, a prestigious school known for its business program. "That's a very expensive school," my father said, not looking up from his pot roast. "I know, but I've been awarded a partial scholarship, and I was hoping that maybe." "We're already paying for Nicholas's education," he interrupted. "And the business had a tough quarter. There's nothing left for yours." "But you always said education was important," I countered, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. My father finally looked at me, his expression a mixture of annoyance and dismissal. "It is important. For the people who will use it. Nicholas will bring his degree back to the family business. What would be the point of spending all that money on you?" My mother stared intently at her plate. Richard smirked. Nicholas at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "I could bring my degree back to the family business too," I said, a last desperate attempt. The laugh that erupted from my father felt like a physical blow. "Women aren't built for success in construction, Brooke. Or most businesses, really. You'll get married, have kids, and whatever money we spent on your education would be wasted. No, you can go to community college if you want to play at having a career before settling down." That night, I cried until there was nothing left in me. Then I got up, washed my face, and made a plan. I would find a way to Westfield without them. I applied for every scholarship I could find, took on 3 part-time jobs, and connected with the financial aid office to arrange a work-study program. By graduation, I had cobbled together enough to make it possible, barely. When I announced at dinner that I would be attending Westfield after all, the reactions were telling. My father looked irritated, as if I deliberately inconvenienced him. My mother seemed worried. Richard called me foolish for taking on student debt. Only Nicholas offered a quiet congratulations when the others weren't listening. The summer before college was tense. I worked morning shifts at a coffee shop, afternoon shifts at the library, and weekend shifts at a clothing store. I came home exhausted, often to find my family gathered in the living room or backyard, enjoying leisure time I couldn't afford to take. The contrast was stark. My parents had purchased Nicholas a new car for his upcoming senior year, while I was saving every penny for textbooks. The distance wasn't just financial. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Dinner invitations excluded me with the excuse that you're always working anyway. I became a ghost in my own home, passing through without leaving an impression. A week before I was set to leave for college, I made one final attempt to bridge the gap. I'd spent months developing a business plan for a sustainable addition to my father's construction company, an eco-friendly materials division that could set Mitchell Construction apart from competitors. The green building movement was just beginning to gain traction, and my research showed significant growth potential. I'd interviewed architects, researched suppliers, and created detailed financial projections. I printed the 30-page proposal on high-quality paper and placed it in a professional binder. With hands that wouldn't stop trembling, I knocked on my father's home office door one Sunday afternoon. "What is it, Brooke?" "I'm reviewing contracts," he said, not looking up. "Dad, I've been working on something I'd like you to see. It's a business proposal for the company." I placed the binder on his desk, my heart pounding. He finally looked up, his expression a mixture of surprise and annoyance. "A business proposal? From you?" "Yes. I've identified an opportunity for Mitchell Construction to enter the sustainable building materials market. The profit margins are higher, and it would position the company as forward-thinking in an industry that's slowly but surely heading in that direction." He stared at me for a long moment, then picked up the binder. I held my breath, hope rising for the first time in years. Maybe this would be the moment he finally saw my value. Instead, without opening it, he tore the proposal in half, then in quarters, the sound of ripping paper deafening in the quiet office. "Don't waste my time with this nonsense," he said, dropping the destroyed pages into his trash bin. "Leave the business to people who understand it." I stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Months of work destroyed in seconds. But more than that, the last thread of hope that I might somehow earn my father's respect was finally, irrevocably severed. I walked out without a word, went to my room, and began packing for college. Not just the essentials I'd need for my dorm, but everything that mattered to me. I somehow understood that whatever happened next would change my relationship with my family forever. That night, I called my grandmother, now living in a retirement community 2 states away. When I told her what happened, she was quiet for a long moment. "Brooke, my darling girl," she finally said, her voice cracking with emotion. "Some people cannot see beyond the limitations of their own minds. Your father is one of those people. It is not your job to make him see your worth. It is your job to go out into this world and create a life so magnificent that he will have no choice but to recognize what he missed." Those words became my North Star in the darkness that followed. The final confrontation came 3 days before I was scheduled to leave for Westfield. The tension in the house had been building, my father's disapproval manifesting as cutting remarks and cold silence. My mother hovered anxiously in the background, trapped between her husband's expectations and her daughter's determination. Dinner that night started like any other, my father discussing business with my brothers, my mother serving food, and me sitting quietly, counting the minutes until I could excuse myself. The conversation turned to Nicholas's upcoming senior year and Richard's recent promotion. "Mitchell men always land on their feet," my father said proudly, raising his glass in a toast to my brothers. Something in me snapped. After years of diminishment, of being treated as less than, I couldn't stay silent anymore. "What about Mitchell women?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. The table went quiet. My father lowered his glass slowly, his expression darkening. "Excuse me?" I said. "What about Mitchell women? You talk about the men in this family as if they're the only ones who matter. I'm going to college too. I've worked 3 jobs to make it happen. Doesn't that deserve acknowledgement?" My father's face reddened. "You want acknowledgement for making things difficult? For rejecting my advice and putting yourself in debt? For thinking you know better than your father? I want acknowledgement for existing." The words burst out of me, years of hurt behind them. "I have never been enough for you, just because I was born a girl instead of the 3rd son you wanted." "That's enough, Brooke," my mother interjected, her voice trembling. "No, it's not enough," I continued, unable to stop now that the dam had broken. "I have tried everything to earn a place in this family. Perfect grades, extracurricular achievements, even a business proposal that could have made the company more successful. But nothing works because the problem isn't me. It's you, I said, looking directly at my father. It's your inability to see value in anyone who doesn't fit your narrow definition of worth. My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You listen to me, young lady. While you live under my roof, you will respect my authority. I built everything this family has. I decide what's valuable and what isn't. Then I won't live under your roof anymore, I replied, also standing. I'm leaving for college in 3 days, and maybe I won't come back. If you walk out that door with this attitude, don't bother coming back at all, he said, his voice cold and final. You want to reject this family's values? Then you reject this family. I looked to my mother, hoping for intervention, support, anything. She sat with tears streaming down her face, but she said nothing. Mom, I whispered. Listen to your father. Brooke, she finally said, not meeting my eyes. He knows what's best. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. I looked at my brothers, Richard smirking slightly, Nicholas staring at his plate. Is that how everyone feels? I asked, my voice breaking. Silence was my answer. Then I guess this is goodbye, I said, pushing back from the table. Thank you for making this decision easier. I walked upstairs to my bedroom and closed the door, leaning against it as sobs racked my body. For nearly an hour, I cried for the family I'd never really had, for the love I'd spent my life chasing but never catching. Then, wiping my tears, I began to pack methodically. Clothes, books, the few mementos that mattered, my grandmother's letters, the fountain pen from my mother, photographs of happier times. As I was zipping my final suitcase, there was a soft knock at the door. It was Amanda, my younger sister by 4 years. At 15, she occupied a strange middle ground in our family, not as dismissed as I was, but clearly less valued than our brothers. Are you really leaving? She asked, her eyes wide with a mixture of admiration and fear. I have to, Amanda, I said, sitting beside her on the bed. I can't be who they want me to be. Will you come back? I hesitated, not wanting to lie. I don't know, but I'll always be your sister no matter what. And you can always reach me, okay? She nodded, then impulsively hugged me. I'm scared to be here without you, she whispered. You're stronger than you know, I told her, fighting back fresh tears. And in 3 years, if you want to follow me, I'll help you however I can. We exchanged email addresses since I suspected my parents might monitor her phone. Then she slipped back to her room, and I finished packing. It was nearly midnight when I carried my bags downstairs. The house was quiet. Everyone retreated to their rooms after the disastrous dinner. I had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that someone would be waiting to stop me, to apologize, to ask me to stay. The empty living room was my answer. I wrote a brief note, I'll be safe. Don't worry about me, and left it on the kitchen counter. Then I walked out the front door of my childhood home, not knowing if I would ever return. The night air was cool for August, carrying the first hints of autumn. I loaded my bags into my used Honda Civic, purchased with my own savings against my father's advice, and sat in the driver's seat, suddenly paralyzed by the enormity of what was happening. I was 18, alone, with only enough money to get me through the first semester if I was extremely careful. The terror of that reality washed over me, and for a moment I considered going back inside, apologizing, accepting my place. Instead, I started the car and drove to the cheapest motel I could find on the outskirts of town. The room was small and smelled of old cigarettes, but it was mine. I sat on the edge of the bed, the enormity of my situation crashing down on me. Panic rose in my chest. What had I done? How would I survive? Who walks away from the security of family, however flawed? With shaking hands, I called the one person I knew would understand. Grandma, I said when she answered, my voice breaking. I left. They disowned me. Her silence lasted only a second. Where are you now, child? I told her about the motel, about the confrontation, about the terrifying uncertainty ahead of me. Listen to me, Brooke, she said firmly. You did the right thing. Your spirit would have died in that house. I don't have much, but I can send you $1,000 to help you get started. And more importantly, I can give you this advice. Reinvent yourself. The Brooke who needed her parents' approval no longer exists. Decide who you want to be now and become her. After we hung up, I sat in that dingy motel room and made myself a promise. I would never again define myself by someone else's limitations. I would build something that no one could tear up and throw away. I would become someone that even my father couldn't dismiss. That night, Brooke Mitchell, the daughter, died. Brooke Mitchell, the creator of her own destiny, was born. My first year at Westfield University nearly broke me. I lived in the cheapest student housing available, a converted storage room in an off-campus house shared with 5 other students. My schedule was punishing: full course load during the day, library job in the evenings, weekend shifts at a local cafe, and occasional nighttime hours as a campus security escort. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. The $1,000 from my grandmother helped with textbooks and initial expenses, but it disappeared quickly. I ate ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, calculated every penny, and still sometimes had to choose between buying toilet paper or doing laundry. Winter was the hardest. My room was poorly insulated, and I slept in layers of clothing under every blanket I owned. Despite these challenges, I excelled academically. My business courses became my lifeline, each lecture affirming that I was where I belonged. I approached my studies with an intensity that sometimes alarmed my professors. While other students complained about assignments, I saw each one as an opportunity to prove my worth, to myself if no one else. It was in my entrepreneurial innovation class that I met Professor Janet Harper, a former fashion executive who had built and sold 2 successful companies before turning to academia. She noticed me staying after class to ask additional questions, saw me working in the library until closing, and eventually invited me to her office hours. "You're either exceptionally motivated or running from something," she said bluntly when I sat down. "Possibly both." Her perception startled me. After a moment's hesitation, I told her everything: my family, the disowning, my determination to succeed despite it all. I expected pity but received something far more valuable: respect. "Brooke, adversity either breaks people or forces them to discover strengths they never knew they had," she said when I finished. "You're clearly in the second category. But you need to channel that drive strategically." Professor Harper became my mentor, tough but encouraging. She pushed me to think beyond traditional business models, to identify gaps in markets that others overlooked. During one late-night discussion about sustainable business practices, the seed of my future company was planted. "The fashion industry is one of the world's worst polluters," she noted. "Fast fashion has created a cycle of waste that's destroying our planet. But sustainable fashion is often too expensive for average consumers." That observation stuck with me. I began researching textiles, manufacturing processes, and supply chains. For my junior year project, I developed a theoretical business model for affordable, eco-friendly clothing. The concept was simple but challenging to execute. Create stylish, durable clothing from recycled materials and sustainable fabrics, manufactured ethically at price points accessible to middle-income consumers. Professor Harper reviewed my project and said simply, "This could work in the real world. But you'd need startup capital." By my senior year, the theoretical project had evolved into a concrete business plan. I called it Revival, where fashion that revived both style and environmental responsibility. Using connections through Professor Harper, I secured a meeting with Westfield's Business Incubator program. Standing before the panel of successful entrepreneurs and investors, I pitched my heart out. My hands trembled, but my voice remained steady as I outlined market research, financial projections, and manufacturing partnerships I'd begun to explore. When they asked why I believed in this concept so passionately, I gave them the honest answer. "Because I understand what it means to be undervalued and discarded," I said. "I want to create a company that sees value in what others throw away." To my amazement, they approved a small loan of $50,000, enough to create a prototype collection and website. The mixture of elation and terror I felt upon receiving that check was indescribable. For the first time, someone was betting on me financially. The possibility of failure became suddenly, terrifyingly real. Graduation came and went without any family in attendance. Amanda sent a card that she must have mailed secretly. My grandmother was too ill to travel but called to tell me how proud she was. I felt their absences like physical pain as I watched classmates celebrate with parents and siblings, but I pushed the feeling down. I couldn't afford the distraction of grief. With my degree in hand and my loan in the bank, I rented a tiny studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood and got to work. The next year passed in a blur of 18-hour days, setbacks, and small victories. I found a small manufacturing facility in North Carolina that was willing to work with my unusual materials and ethical labor requirements. I built relationships with suppliers of recycled fabrics and sustainable textiles. I learned to sew, not well enough to produce garments, but enough to understand the construction and communicate effectively with the professionals. My first collection consisted of 10 pieces, versatile, stylish items that could mix and match to create numerous outfits. The photography session for the website was done on a shoestring budget with models I found at the local community college. I taught myself basic web design to avoid hiring a developer. The website launched with little fanfare. Sales trickled in slowly, mainly from environmentally conscious consumers who found me through targeted social media efforts. It wasn't enough to sustain the business long term, but it was validation that there was interest in my concept. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Cassandra Ford, the buyer for a popular mid-range department store chain called Modern Living, happened across my website while researching sustainable brands. She emailed requesting a meeting, and I nearly missed it because her message went to my spam folder. When I finally saw it, 3 days late, I responded with embarrassing enthusiasm. Meeting Cassandra at the Modern Living corporate headquarters, I felt completely out of place. My one professional outfit, purchased secondhand and carefully maintained, felt inadequate among the stylish executives in the waiting room. But when I presented my collection, my insecurities fell away. This was my creation, my vision, and I spoke about it with confidence born of complete knowledge and belief. "We've been looking to add a sustainable line," Cassandra said after examining each piece. "But most of what we've seen is either too expensive for our customers or too hempsack looking, if you know what I mean. Your pieces are different. They look like clothes people actually want to wear." 2 weeks later, Modern Living placed an order for 5,000 units to be tested in 30 stores. The purchase order was large enough that I needed to secure additional funding to fulfill it. Armed with the contract, I approached several small business lenders before finding one willing to take the risk. The Modern Living launch exceeded everyone's expectations. My collection sold out in 3 weeks, generating reorders and expanded placement to more stores. Suddenly Revival Wear wasn't just a viable business, it was a growing one. The next 3 years were a whirlwind of expansion, challenges, and learning. I moved operations to a proper office, hired a small team, and expanded our product line. We experienced manufacturing delays, shipping problems, and all the typical growing pains of a young company. But we also developed a loyal customer base, received positive press in several fashion publications, and began to turn a consistent profit. Through it all, I built relationships with people who became more than colleagues. They became my chosen family. Maria, my operations manager, who believed in Revival Wear enough to leave a secure corporate job. Derek, my first hire, who started in customer service and grew into a talented marketing director. Keisha, the lead designer who joined in our second year and elevated our aesthetic while staying true to our values. Together, we celebrated victories and weathered crises. Success didn't erase the pain of family rejection, but it provided a counter-narrative to my father's dismissal. Each milestone, our first million in sales, our feature in Sustainable Business Monthly, the day we moved into our beautiful new office space, I would think, see, I did have value all along. On the 5th anniversary of Revival Wear's founding, we were featured in Business Forward, a national magazine focusing on innovative companies. The cover showed me standing amid colorful fabrics in our design studio with the headline Fashion Revolutionary, How Brooke Mitchell is Changing How We Think About Clothes. Inside was a 6-page spread detailing my journey and the company's mission. As I looked at my own face on the magazine cover, I felt a strange mixture of pride and apprehension. This level of publicity meant my family would almost certainly see it. For the first time in 7 years, I allowed myself to wonder what they might think, if my father would finally acknowledge my capability, if my mother regretted her silence, if my brothers recognized what they had participated in. I didn't have to wonder long. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, its subject line jolting me like an electric shock. "Congratulations from Mom." For several minutes, I simply stared at it, unable to click. 7 years of silence, and now this. My assistant, noticing my distraction, asked if everything was all right. I mumbled something about needing a moment and retreated to my private office. With a deep breath, I opened the message. "Dear Brooke, your father and I saw your future in Business Forward. We are so proud of what you've accomplished with your company. You always were a determined girl. I hope you are well and happy. Perhaps we could reconnect sometime. Love, Mom." No acknowledgement of their rejection. No apology for 7 years of silence. Just proud and determined girl, as if I'd simply been away at summer camp instead of building a life from scratch after being disowned. I closed the email without responding, but it haunted me. That night, I called Abigail, my closest friend since college and the person who had talked me through countless dark moments. "They're testing the waters," she said after I read her the message. "They've seen you're successful now, and they want to be associated with that success." "That's cynical," I replied, though part of me wondered if she was right. "Maybe. But protect yourself, Brooke. They hurt you once. Don't give them easy access to hurt you again." Over the next few weeks, more messages arrived. Richard sent a LinkedIn connection request with a note about catching up with my successful sis. Nicholas emailed congratulating me on proving everyone wrong. Even my father sent a brief message acknowledging that my little clothing business seems to be doing well. The tone of these communications ranged from falsely casual to grudgingly impressed, but none contained what I most needed to hear. "We were wrong to reject you. We're sorry for the pain we caused." Then came the message that revealed their true motivations. My sister Amanda, now 22 and working as a teacher, called to tell me she was engaged. I was genuinely happy for her. We'd maintained sporadic contact over the years, though she was careful to keep it secret from our parents. "They want you at the wedding," she said hesitantly. "But there's something else." "What is it?" "Dad's business is in trouble. The recession hit construction hard, and he made some bad investments. They're facing bankruptcy unless they find capital quickly. I think that's why they're reaching out now." The pieces clicked into place. The timing of their renewed interest coincided perfectly with both my public success and their financial troubles. It wasn't about reconciliation, it was about rescue. Sure enough, 2 days later, I received an email from my father requesting a family dinner to reconnect and discuss some opportunities. The transparent attempt to manipulate me should have made me angry, but instead, I felt a strange calm. For the first time, I held the power in our relationship. After discussing it with my inner circle of trusted friends, I agreed to the dinner on neutral ground, a private room at an upscale restaurant in the city. I spent hours preparing emotionally, working with my therapist to establish boundaries and process the complex emotions this reunion would inevitably trigger. The evening of the dinner arrived, and I dressed carefully in one of Revival Wear's signature pieces, a perfectly tailored blazer made from recycled materials, paired with sustainable silk pants. My appearance would be both armor and statement. Walking into the restaurant, I spotted them immediately at a corner table. My father, grayer but still imposing. My mother, thinner and more drawn than I remembered. Richard and Nicholas, both in business attire that couldn't quite hide their discomfort. Amanda, looking nervously between them and the door, brightening when she saw me. Time seemed to slow as I approached the table. 7 years collapsed into a heartbeat. Then I was there, standing before the family that had cast me out. "Brooke," my mother said, rising to embrace me. I accepted the hug stiffly, not returning it. "You look wonderful." "Thank you," I replied, taking the empty seat between Amanda and Nicholas. "It's been a long time." "Too long," my father said with forced joviality. "Water under the bridge now, though. We're all here as family." I noted his use of the word family, a concept they had explicitly removed me from 7 years ago. Are we? I asked mildly. That's not the last conversation we had on the subject. An uncomfortable silence fell. Amanda squeezed my hand under the table. People say things in anger, my mother interjected. What matters is that we're together now. I didn't contradict her, but I didn't agree either. Throughout the appetizers, the conversation remained superficial, comments about the food, safe questions about my company, carefully edited updates about their lives. No one mentioned the disowning, the years of silence, the complete absence of support during my hardest times. It was during the main course that my father finally revealed his true purpose. "Brooke, we've been following your success with interest," he said, dabbing his mouth with a napkin. "You've clearly got a head for business. Your mother and I have been discussing how wonderful it would be to bring that talent back to the family." "Back to the family business, you mean?" I clarified. "Exactly," he nodded, seemingly relieved that I'd made the connection. "Mitchell Construction is at a crossroads. The industry is changing, and we need fresh ideas, new approaches. The kind of innovative thinking you've shown with your clothing company." Richard jumped in. "We've put together a proposal for you to consider." He slid a folder across the table. "An investment opportunity. We're looking to expand into commercial development, but we need capital." I didn't touch the folder. "An investment opportunity," I repeated. "That's why you reached out after 7 years? That's why we're having this family reunion." "Not just that," my mother said quickly. "We've missed you, Brooke. We want to be part of your life again." "Now that I'm successful," I added. "Now that I've proven my worth according to metrics you understand." "That's not fair," Nicholas protested, speaking for the first time. "We're proud of what you've accomplished." "Are you?" I asked, looking directly at my father. "Are you proud, Dad? Or are you just in need of a bailout?" His expression hardened. "This attitude isn't helpful, Brooke. I'm offering you a chance to be part of something meaningful. The Mitchell family legacy. The same legacy you told me I had no place in? The same family that stood silent while you threw me away." My voice remained calm, though emotion churned beneath the surface. "You disowned me for the crime of being female and ambitious. You told me women aren't built for success. Now you want access to the success I built without you." "That's ancient history," my father dismissed with a wave of his hand. "And frankly, it helped make you who you are. You should be thanking me for pushing you to prove yourself." The audacity of his statement left me momentarily speechless. Amanda gasped. Even Richard and Nicholas looked uncomfortable. "Harold," my mother murmured, "that's not." "It's the truth," he insisted. She needed to toughen up. The business world isn't kind to the soft. Look at her now, successful because I forced her to be. I stood slowly, placing my napkin beside my half-eaten dinner. "Thank you for clarifying where we stand. You haven't changed at all. You still don't see what you did wrong. You still can't acknowledge my worth unless it benefits you directly." "Sit down, Brooke," my father commanded. "Don't be dramatic. We're discussing a business opportunity." "No," I said firmly. "We're not. We were never discussing business. You were attempting to use me, just as you always have. The difference is that now I see it clearly." I turned to Amanda. "I love you, and I'll be at your wedding. But not as part of this family charade." To my mother, "If you ever want to have a real conversation about what happened and your role in it, I'm open to that. But it will need to be just us." Then to my father, "I built something valuable without your help, without your name, without your approval. I don't need your validation anymore, and I certainly don't need to rescue you from your financial mistakes." My answer is no. With that, I walked out, leaving behind the folder untouched and my family in stunned silence. Outside in the cool evening air, I took my first full breath in hours. There was pain, yes, the reopened wound of their rejection, the fresh hurt of realizing they still didn't truly see me. But beneath that was something unexpected: peace. I had faced my deepest fear, confronting the family that had discarded me, and I had done it on my terms. I had maintained my boundaries, my dignity, and my truth. For the first time, I felt truly free of their power to define me. 3 days after the disastrous family dinner, I received a text from Amanda asking if she could come to my office. Just me, she specified. I need to talk to you. When she arrived, her eyes were red-rimmed from crying. I took her to the small garden terrace outside our office building, a quiet space where we could talk privately. They're furious, she said without preamble. Dad especially. He expected you to jump at the chance to return to the fold, as he put it. I'm not surprised, I replied, handing her a tissue. But I am sorry it's affecting you. Don't be sorry. You were right to stand up to them. She twisted the tissue between her fingers. The thing is, after you left, Dad showed us the actual proposal. Brooke, it wasn't just an investment they wanted. They were asking for a complete bailout, $2 million to save the company from bankruptcy. And in return, they were offering you a junior partnership with no real decision-making power. The audacity was breathtaking. So even now, after everything, I still wouldn't be an equal. Amanda nodded miserably. It gets worse. I overheard Dad and Richard talking afterward. If you had agreed, they planned to use your name and success in their marketing to attract new clients, but they never intended to let you have any real authority. A hollow laugh escaped me. Of course not. Women aren't built for success in construction, remember. I'm so sorry, Amanda whispered. I knew they were reaching out because of your success, but I didn't know how calculated it all was. I took her hand. It's not your fault. You're caught in the middle, and that's an awful place to be. The wedding is in 6 months, she said. I still want you there, but I understand if you can't come. I'll be there for you, I promised. But on my terms, not theirs. And speaking of terms, I have a proposition for you. I explained that while I wouldn't bail out my father's company, I would be happy to help Amanda and her fiancé with a down payment on a house. No strings attached, just a gift from sister to sister. I can't accept that, she protested. Dad would see it as you trying to buy my loyalty. It's not about Dad. It's about us. About family, real family, the kind that supports each other without conditions. I squeezed her hand. Think about it. The offer stands regardless of what you decide about the wedding or anything else. After Amanda left, I expected that would be the end of my family interactions for a while. I was wrong. The next morning, my father appeared at Revival Ware's reception area, demanding to see me. My assistant, alarmed by his aggressive tone, called security before informing me of his presence. I asked security to escort him to our conference room rather than removing him from the building. This confrontation had been brewing for 7 years. Perhaps it was time to have it out once and for all. Impressive setup you have here, my father said when I entered, gesturing around the stylishly appointed conference room. All this from recycled clothes. Sustainable fashion, I corrected, taking a seat across from him. What do you want, Dad? I want to understand why you're punishing the family for ancient history, he said, leaning forward. This childish grudge is hurting everyone, including your mother and sister. This isn't about punishment, I replied evenly. It's about boundaries. You disowned me. You can't just decide to undisown me when it's convenient for you financially. So this is about making me grovel? You want me to admit I was wrong. His face reddened. Fine. I misjudged your business acumen. I didn't think you had what it takes. I was incorrect in that assessment. Satisfied? That's not an apology. That's a tactical concession. I maintained eye contact despite the discomfort. And it's not about being wrong about my potential. It's about how you treated me my entire life because I was female. It's about throwing me away when I didn't conform to your narrow expectations. It's about the fact that, even now, you see me as a resource to exploit rather than a daughter to reconcile with. He scoffed. You always were dramatic. Life isn't a Hallmark movie, Brooke. I built a business to provide for my family. I made tough decisions. Not everything is about feelings. This meeting is over, I said, standing. You still don't get it, and I don't think you ever will. I'm not giving you money. I'm not saving your company. And I'm not subjecting myself to more emotional manipulation. You think you're so much better than us now, he spat, also rising. With your fancy office and magazine covers. But you wouldn't be here if I hadn't pushed you out. You succeeded because of me, not in spite of me. For a moment, I was that 18-year-old girl again, desperate for approval and afraid of his anger. but only for a moment. No, I said firmly. I succeeded because I worked harder than anyone should have to work. I succeeded because people like Professor Harper saw my value when you couldn't. I succeeded because I built authentic relationships with people who genuinely care about my well-being, not just what I can do for them. I walked to the door and held it open. Goodbye, Dad. I wish you well, but I can't be what you want me to be. I never could. As security escorted him out, I heard him call back, "This isn't over, Brooke." But it was. At least, that chapter was over. In the weeks that followed, I worked with my therapist to process the complicated emotions the reunions had stirred up. The little girl inside me still yearned for parental approval, but the woman I'd become understood that seeking it was a path to continued pain. I made peace with the fact that my father might never change, that my mother might never find the courage to stand against him, that my brothers might always view me through the distorted lens of our upbringing. I couldn't control their perceptions or actions. I could only control my response. With Amanda, I established a relationship independent of the rest of the family. We met for lunch every few weeks, carefully avoiding discussion of our parents unless absolutely necessary. I attended her wedding 6 months later, arriving just before the ceremony and leaving directly after congratulating the couple, thus minimizing interaction with the rest of the family. My mother reached out privately a month after the confrontation with my father, asking to meet for coffee. Our conversation was strained, but represented a small step towards something new, not the mother-daughter relationship I had craved as a child, but perhaps a measured adult connection based on mutual respect. "I should have stood up for you," she admitted quietly over her latte. I was wrong not to. It wasn't a complete acknowledgement of all that had happened, but it was something. A crack in the wall of denial that had characterized my family's approach to our history. As for the Mitchell Construction Company, it filed for bankruptcy protection 3 months after our confrontation. My father was forced to sell most of the assets to pay creditors. Richard and Nicholas had to find jobs with other firms. The family legacy my father had been so concerned about preserving ended not because of my refusal to help, but because of years of mismanagement and failure to adapt to changing markets. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall. Only sadness for what could have been if pride and prejudice hadn't blinded my father to the value of all his children, regardless of gender. My own company continued to thrive. We expanded into home goods made from recycled materials, opened 3 flagship stores in major cities, and launched a successful e-commerce platform. More importantly, we created scholarship programs for young women entering business, particularly those from backgrounds where their ambitions weren't supported. With each young woman we helped, I healed a little more of my own past wounds. I couldn't change my family's story, but I could help change the stories of others like me. The final communication I received from my father came a year after the bankruptcy. A brief email, clearly written in a moment of bitter reflection. "You got what you wanted. The Mitchell name means nothing now." My response was equally brief. "That's where you're wrong. I've given the Mitchell name a meaning it never had before: innovation, sustainability, and opportunity for all. Your grandchildren, should I have any, will be proud to carry it." He never replied. I hadn't expected him to. 10 years after walking out of my parents' house with nothing but a few suitcases and determination, I stand in the headquarters of Revival where, now a company valued at over $50 million. The journey from that terrified 18-year-old to the woman I am today at 29 has been filled with challenges, triumphs, and profound life lessons. The most important of these lessons has been learning the difference between family by blood and family by choice. The people who have supported me through my darkest moments: Abigail, who let me crash on her couch when I couldn't make rent; Professor Harper, who believed in my vision when it was just an idea; Maria, Derek, and Keisha, who built Revival where alongside me. These are my true family. They love me for who I am, not for what I can provide or how I fit into their expectations. This understanding led me to create the New Foundations Initiative, a program that provides mentorship and seed funding to young women from unsupportive backgrounds who have entrepreneurial dreams. So far, We've helped launch 27 businesses, from a mobile veterinary clinic serving rural communities to an innovative educational technology platform. Each of these women has her own story of overcoming limitation and rejection, and each is writing a new ending to that story. My relationship with my sister Amanda has evolved into something beautiful and supportive. After her wedding, she began to question many of the values we were raised with. 2 years ago, she left her teaching position to join Revival Ware's educational outreach program, where she develops curriculum about sustainable business practices for high schools and colleges. Her husband, Michael, a kind and progressive man who couldn't be more different from our father, fully supports her career. My mother and I maintain a careful relationship based on clearly defined boundaries. After my father's business collapsed, she found herself having to create an identity separate from being his wife for the first time in decades. She went back to school to finish the degree she'd abandoned when they married, and now works as a counselor for women in transition. We meet for lunch monthly, discussing neutral topics and occasionally, when she's ready, processing small pieces of our complicated past. "I'm sorry I taught you that your worth was tied to male approval," she told me during one such lunch. "I believed it about myself for so long that I didn't know how to teach you differently." Her apology, while not erasing the past, opened the door to healing I hadn't thought possible. My brothers have taken different paths. Richard, still struggling with the collapse of his expected inheritance, maintains minimal contact with me, usually only at family events we both attend for Amanda's sake. Nicholas, surprisingly, reached out after hitting rock bottom post-bankruptcy. He asked for a job at Revival Ware, and after much consideration, I offered him an entry-level position in our logistics department, with the clear understanding that he would receive no special treatment and would be evaluated solely on his performance. 2 years later, he's worked his way up to regional distribution manager, earning the respect of his colleagues through genuine effort rather than family connection. Our relationship has evolved into a tentative friendship based on mutual respect, something I never thought possible given our upbringing. As for my father, we remain estranged. His pride never allowed him to truly acknowledge the harm he caused or the opportunities he missed by limiting his vision of success to only his sons. The last I heard, he works as a consultant for a small construction firm, a shadow of his former role as owner and CEO. I feel sadness for what could have been, but I no longer feel responsibility for his choices or their consequences. My grandmother, whose belief in me never wavered, passed away last year at 93. In her will, she left me her collection of books about pioneering women, the same books she had secretly shared with me as a child. They occupy a special shelf in my office, a reminder that someone saw my potential even when those who should have seen it most clearly were blind to it. The journey of healing is ongoing. There are still moments when the old wounds reopen, holidays, certain songs, the scent of my mother's perfume caught unexpectedly in a crowded elevator. In those moments, I remind myself that my worth was never determined by my family's ability to recognize it. It was always there, waiting for me to claim it for myself. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or rejected for who you are, know this: the limitations others place on you are reflections of their fear and ignorance, not your potential. Your worth is intrinsic. Your path is yours to determine. Building a life on your own terms isn't easy. There will be moments of doubt, nights of tears, and days when giving up seems like the only option. In those moments, look for the helpers. They are always there if you're willing to be vulnerable enough to let them in. Create your chosen family from people who celebrate your victories and support you through defeats. Learn to be that person for others as well. And perhaps most importantly, when you achieve success, however you define it, remember to send the elevator back down. Use your platform, your resources, and your experience to create opportunities for others facing the same barriers you once faced. In doing so, you transform your personal triumph into a legacy of positive change. Thank you for listening to my story today. If it resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and reinvention. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by family approval. And I'd love to know in the comments, What limiting belief about yourself did you have to overcome to pursue your dreams? How did you find the courage to defy others' expectations? Remember, the family that matters most is the one that loves you for exactly who you are, whether that's the family you were born into or the one you create along the way. Until next time, this is Brooke Mitchell, reminding you that sometimes being disowned is just the first step to owning your true self.